Good morning, everyone. We are all still joining, so we've got a few more minutes, but welcome. And as you can see, we're actually joined with Pastor Elizabeth and Pastor Ron live in Heritage Hall. Live from Heritage Hall.
Oh, there's Marissa. Okay, Kyle. Thank you, Kyle. Our technology director. Cynthia, you're on camera too. You know that.
Oh, yes. And
okay. Thank you.
Hi, girls.
Hi. Good morning.
Hi.
Well, we'll stay until Sunday school starts, I guess.
All right.
Good.
Good to see everyone.
and by the way, I'm assuming we should go until about 9:45. Is that when?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. I think people are still joining, so let's give it one more minute and then we'll go ahead and get started.
This is worse than TV in the studio. See anybody there?
Okay, so it is 1 minute after 9 o'clock. So why don't we go ahead and get started? I know people will still be joining. It's absolutely fantastic to see so many people joining the Adult Forum. It's a little bit of a rainy, drizzly day, at least in the Bay Area, but I think in some cases that might actually lead fewer people to go to church, but I think when we're virtual, maybe that actually leads more people to go to church. But regardless, I know the reason that we're really all here is to celebrate Pastor Ron after 4 years of ministry at St. Mark's, both in this Adult Forum where we're fortunate to have the opportunity to have a conversation with Pastor Ron, but also with Pastor Elizabeth, because they've been such a strong ministry team. And basically, this is a completely open, informal conversation. I have some questions that I'm going to tee up for them off the bat, but would really welcome others to also, if you have questions or things that you'd like to ask, especially Pastor Ron, this is your last chance. So please feel free to probably raise your Zoom hand. I think we're hopefully all familiar with how to do that, and I'll do my best to get to your questions as well. And then the other thing, of course, is the requisite for all virtual meetings. Just if you could make sure that you stay on mute when you are not talking, so that there's no background noise. I will actually do the same, which virtually guarantees there will be some moment when I'll start talking and still be on mute, and then you can all call me out on it. But yeah, please, everyone, go ahead and stay on mute unless you do have a question, and then we'll make sure that we get to you. But again, it's so great to see everyone here, and again, it's just a wonderful morning to really celebrate the ministry and contributions of Pastor Ron to St. Mark's. So I guess I'll just kick things off with sort of the how it started, your relationship with St. Mark's. Pastor Ron, could you just let us know, how did you first find out about St. Mark's? And what was the process for you to become a candidate for associate pastor here?
As many of you know, I came down to the Bay Area with Cynthia without call, still open to some call in ministry. And I had two bishops, actually one bishop and one assistant to a bishop, tell me that the only thing that I could probably do at this point in my life is interim ministry. So I went through the full training to become an interim pastor. But then just in an effort to network with colleagues in the area here, I decided on my own to go to the pastors leadership training, or not training, conference in Squaw Valley in October. And a colleague of mine, a friend of mine told me, you know, you might want to meet this Pastor Elizabeth from St. Mark's. And so the second day I saw her and I went up and introduced myself to her, and in 5-minute conversation, which I didn't know ahead of time, was that there was an opening for an associate pastor at St. Mark's. Well, that piqued my interest to no end. And so I asked Elizabeth if we could sit down and have lunch together. And we had a wonderful conversation over lunch, getting acquainted with one another. And at the end of the lunch, this is what I told her. I said, if you want to consider me to be one of the candidates for a call to St. Mark's, I understand your budget is limited. If you want me to come to 3/4 time, or you want to call a full-time younger pastor that you might have to mentor, that's your choice. And that's how I left it.
So then I very wisely said, we need to seek counsel from our bishop. And so that night at a reception, we went up to Bishop Holmrud and said, we've been talking to each other, and would you be okay if I brought Pastor Ron's name to the call committee? Call committee was being chaired by Dr. Margaret McLean, and the bishop said, I remember this very clearly, I'll just get out of the way and let you and the call committee
And the Spirit.
keep going. So that's really how we connected, and Pastor Ron you were one of 3 candidates. And clearly the Spirit brought our pastoral team together, and the call was yours. So that's how it happened.
Wow. So at Lake Tahoe is where you first.
Yes, and a lot of work by the call committee too.
Yes.
Yes.
A lot of work.
That's wonderful. I'm just curious, Dr. McLean, is there anything that I hate to put you on the spot, which means
I was going to ask the same question. Thank you, Randy.
Is there anything you'd like to add to the kind of from the call committee's perspective as the name was brought forward and your deliberations?
Well, I suppose the first thing would be, really, someone coming in a little late? Again, another one? So I think that was the first reaction of the call committee. And what struck me when we interviewed Pastor Ron, which was a full, well, it was 2 days worth of interviews, etc. One of the things we did under the direction of Andrew Selig was to take a walk around the neighborhood. We did that with all of the candidates. But what struck me about Pastor Ron was how at home he felt in the Tenderloin. You know, there was just no hesitation walking into St. Boniface Church, walking, you know, up and down the streets of the Tenderloin. We may have taken him for Yemeni food, and he did that. I think that's where we went with him. Just the comfort level was so striking. That's one of the highlights, and it was raining, of course. That's when we used to have rain in the Bay Area. That was 4 years ago. We haven't. But that's what struck me, and then the process unfolded with the call committee and the congregational vote. And the second thing I recall was just how excited he was when I called after that vote.
That's great. That's great. Thanks. Thank you so much, Margaret. So let me just ask this. So what have been over the past 4 years, and this is for both of you, over the past 4 years, what have been the high points? What really sticks out in your memory as sort of the most joyful or kind of most meaningful moments over the past 4 years as a ministry team?
I think one that stands out for me is the Christmas pageant. I heard about the Christmas pageant. I thought, oh, just another Christmas pageant. Well, you don't just do another Christmas pageant here at St. Mark's. And the first time that I was up on quote stage, and everybody was gathered in the chancel singing, I about wept, because it was just a wonderful experience to see this intergenerational drama unfold right before my very eyes and everybody else in the congregation. So to me, that was definitely a highlight. Another one would have been which unfortunately we couldn't do this last year, was the Oktoberfest.
Right.
The way that everybody comes together and provides this meal, not just for the members of the congregation, but for the community as well, and all the planning, organizing, coordinating, and that goes on to make that happen. And I hope that you continue to do that once we get out of this COVID. But those are a couple of main highlights for me.
I think you hit mine too, but there's so many highlights. There's also one kind of vivid memory I have is when we were invited over to St. Mary's Cathedral to be at the Advent Vesper service. And when we got there, we were told that the priest who would be presiding had broken his ankle. So it was just Pastor Ron and I leading the service and preaching, and we have a picture of that. But I remember just sitting in the chancel there with you thinking, this has got to be a first. 2 Lutherans leading worship at St. Mary's Cathedral. So a joyful opportunity, and that's what St. Mark's gives us. It gives us the opportunity in so many public ways to participate as pastors. And that's been a joy.
Could I throw in, could I toss in one?
Yeah.
additional
Of
thing?
course, Cynthia.
To me, there's
Oh, come on up and join us,
Come on.
Cynthia. Yeah.
there's been an amazing high point to me of the two of you working so with such mutual respect and deep, honest understanding and communication and joy. You know when your husband has a good work partner because you experience that in him. And I have just been moved by your deep warmth and affirmation, Pastor, and by the way you two have worked together. To me, that's been an ongoing high point of real beauty, just real beauty.
And I'll piggyback on that. Right after Pastor Elizabeth and I had this conversation at the conference, and it was agreed by the bishop that my name could be put in the process, I had a colleague and friend from the Pacific Northwest who was there, told him about it, and first question he asked me was, "Are you okay with being an associate pastor?" And without hesitation, I said yes. But I also realized that coming with my experience and also being a male, it could be a bit intimidating to Pastor Elizabeth, but it wasn't. We did go through our testing period, I think, of learning to trust one another. But once we got through that, that was also a highlight for me, that once we got through that period, I guess we call it the honeymoon period, we were married, we were a team, and that definitely has been a highlight.
Off and running. Yeah, I think I can remember only one kind of argument that we had. I mean, we had just some disagreements, very few, but one argument, and I think if I'm remembering correctly, it was on the length of meetings. At that, I think this was early on. I wanted 60-minute, very efficient church meetings. I was tired at that point. You know, you're tired when you're by yourself here. And Pastor Ron wanted longer meetings because, as you said, it was the only opportunity you got to meet people. So we had the argument about the length of meetings, and we quickly moved on. And I told him to start visiting people. That's how you're going to be. So that was our really only disagreement that I recall. You might have others. Okay.
Pastor Elizabeth exposed herself at this point, just with that comment. You know, she wants things very much in order. She told me that. She warned me about that.
Okay.
And I always felt that in terms of another minor high point, if I would leave the day, if I had got her and both of us to laugh a little bit, that felt like an accomplishment.
And we did a lot of laughing.
And we did a lot of laughing, and we have done, yes.
And we made a point of eating lunch together whenever we could. So we'll stop talking, Randy.
No, it's all about both of you talking. So this is great. And just for those that joined a little bit later, just to repeat, this is just a very open, informal conversation with the ministry team of Pastor Elizabeth and Pastor Ron as we celebrate Pastor Ron's retirement and 4 years of service at St. Mark's. Appreciate everyone staying on mute, but please, if you do have a question, raise your Zoom hand, and we'll be happy to go to you and go to your question. But I also have a few additional questions that I'm happy to continue to lead with. And actually, I think Pastor Ron, you gave a little bit of what you've appreciated about the team and Pastor Elizabeth. So let me ask you, Pastor Elizabeth, you've worked on a number of pastoral teams. And so what are some things that have stood out to you that you've most appreciated about being in a ministry team with Pastor Ron?
Yes, thank you. I mean, the mutual respect for each other, the trust, as Cynthia talked about. To have such a wise, experienced colleague, I just thought, you know, between the two of us, we have 70+ years of ordained ministry experience. I knew that he could tackle some of our more challenging ministries here at St. Mark's and provide the pastoral leadership with no oversight on my part. I don't think I micromanage you at all. Okay. So no oversight on my part, and the collaboration together. We would debrief things together. We would share concerns together. We would call each other if something came up and we just needed to hear the wisdom that we could provide to one another. So I felt like I had a full and equal partner here in ministry, and I think we showed that to the congregation. And we like each other. And our spouses like each other. So if Hans was here, he would say how much he respects you, but also just enjoys Cynthia so much too.
So you've talked about some of the high points. I'd be curious, what are some of the, I won't say low points, but what have been some of the bigger challenges over the past 4 years that you've worked through together? Like, what would you say as some of the things that either have been sort of disappointments that you wish had gone better, or just the biggest challenges that you've faced as a ministry team?
I think from my perspective, one was just in terms of how we went about planning worship. And I think that's where we had some early conversations too. It took me a while to adjust to the worship style of St. Mark's. And a lot of that was confirmed when I did some one-on-one conversations with folks, and people appreciated the 9 a.m. service the way it was, and people appreciated the 11 o'clock service the way it was. And, you know, so yeah, that was one of the challenges for me, I think. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I think the most obvious one is this COVID time, you know,
Yeah.
and how we've had to change how we are the church, how we are community, how we worship. And we did it together, but it's been a challenging year for everybody, certainly, but it's a challenging year for worship and everything. Just a personal note too, you know, between Hans and I, we lost 3 parents, all while Pastor Ron was here. And then I lost my sister. So it's been a tough year in terms of our family life, but Pastor Ron, you know, supported, cared for us. I could be away tending to family and didn't worry at all. So I deeply appreciated that.
And I would say also a disappointment was having to cancel Holden.
Yeah.
Trip. I mean, there were 31 people, many of you on the screen, who had signed up to go to Holden last summer, and you know, that was really a big disappointment. I was looking so forward to that, to spending a whole week with some of you, building community and relationships with one another. So.
Yeah, I know they just reopened registration, I think last week. So there will be a summer at Holden, but yeah, appreciate that. So again, I want to invite, if anyone does have a question or that they would like to ask, please go ahead and raise your Zoom hand. I don't see any now. So let me ask this question.
Randy, Elise Simonian just put a comment in the chat, which I would like to speak to.
That's it.
She's mentioned no confirmation for Peter, and I need to acknowledge that. You know, 2 years ago, there weren't enough youth at the confirmation age, so we chose not to have a confirmation class for that 1 year, and then COVID came along. And there were 7 eligible young people for confirmation, and yet about 5 of them weren't necessarily as active in Sunday school as a couple of them had been. And so using COVID time to try to build community and have confirmation, it was a tough choice, but we chose not to do it. But hopefully in this fall, as we come out of COVID, I'm going to put a plea out to you, members of this congregation, because Pastor Elizabeth certainly can't lead into it. And, you know, if there's an interim in place come fall, that person's not going to be able to focus on confirmation. If it's 1 of you, 2 of you, take on the responsibility of bringing those young people together and offering them confirmation. I know a lot of you are PKs. You know what you've been taught, and you know how to teach. So I would challenge you to take on that responsibility.
Great, thank you.
And if you want to contact me before I go and know who those young people are, I'd be happy to.
Great. And I think okay, there you're back. There was a quick freeze, but I think you can hear us, right? Yeah, okay. So then another question that was in the chat, I think you might be able to see it, but from Jerry, about how you've supported the revitalization of the Urban Life Center, and just some of the activities that you feel are important related to the ULC.
Can you repeat it, Randy, because you froze?
Oh, okay. So the question is about the Urban Life Center and the revitalization of the Urban Life Center. And just, I understand you started a small committee related to the ULC, and just talk a little bit about how you've thought about that.
Hey, hi. We're having internet issues here.
Okay. I think you're back. I can hear you okay. So did you hear the question?
No.
Okay, it looks like they did freeze again.
Now we're knowing that.
Okay, we'll just pause for a minute. I know this is sort of the facilitator's nightmare, right? Thanks, Matt. If someone would like to, if anyone has a joke they'd like to tell, or no.
Yeah, I'll just
Oh,
talk
okay.
on that. Oh, they're back. Are they back?
It's sort of
Okay.
intermittent.
We have our technology experts coming in. Internet,
Okay.
unstable internet,
Freezing.
it's all
And they're-
freezing.
And we reduce the picture so we can see the chat message.
Oh,
Easy.
but it's unstable connection. It's just freezing. We're freezing.
Actually, we can hear you right now.
Oh, okay.
Can you?
Glad I
Yeah,
have.
we can hear you. So I think maybe changing the video might have helped a little bit. So the question was about Urban Life Center, and just talk about a little bit of the work you've done focused on revitalizing the Urban Life Center, Pastor Ron.
Yes. One of my tenets for ministry started way back in Washington, D.C., was maximizing the use of a church facility in the way of being in mission with the community. And when I came here and saw the Urban Life Center and realized that it was being underutilized, I spent, I think, my second summer here going out and meeting service providers in the Tenderloin in particular, and just getting to build a network. Is space available if they wanted to start a new program or expand their current program? And out of those many conversations was introduced to the aide to one of our supervisors. And when she heard the same offer, she pointed us in the direction of Project Homeless Connect, because she knew that they were going to be put out of their facility. So that started the ball rolling in terms of being able to build a relationship with them and invite them to operate their program out of the Urban Life Center. And by that time, Jeff Kohler was well in place as the exec director of Martin Luther Tower, Inc. And he kind of stepped into that role then from there on, publicizing the availability of space at the Urban Life Center. And at this point, almost all of the rooms and space of the Urban Life Center is leased out for ministry.
Great. Thank you, Pastor Ron. Just for those moderating who's attending, I did notice there's someone named Richard Carroll that I don't think they're members of St. Mark's. So, sorry, just kidding. That's my dad.
That's your dad. Hi, Pastor Carol.
Let me ask about later in your career, but I know you, Pastor Ron, you're the type that's continuously learning. So what are ways that you even developed? Like, what are things that you think you've learned, or areas you've been particularly kind of challenged in your own development over your time at St. Mark's?
I think one of my challenges was trying to find an inroad into the Asian community. I know many of you who are members have spouses that are Asian, but just in terms of the locale that we're in, trying to figure out a way of making an inroad into that community. And with COVID coming along this last year, that obviously was inhibited, but that remains a challenge for me. Yeah.
And then this was a question that was prompted, but any just from a humor perspective, like are there moments where you just remember that you've laughed the most as part of your ministry here? And this is for both of you. Like what have been the most humorous moments of the past of the past 4 years of your ministry?
Well, I think, you know, we're going to add our director of music to the mix here. Every week, the three of us meet to plan worship, to talk about our worship ministry here at St. Mark's, this relationship between the three of us is very collegial. I mean, all pretenses are dropped at that point, and we've been really honest with each other, but we just have had to laugh together. And we've laughed this year with COVID and the tech glitches that we've had and the bloopers that we've had when we were recording worship. You just can't help but laugh. So I think, I mean, just generally, because our relationships have been just so authentic and honest with each other, there's been laughter and there's been tears as well.
I have consistently commented on, teased Tim about the length of his hair this year. I was the one who encouraged him to tie it up in a bun, and I even offered to cut his hair if he wanted, which I have done in the past, just as an avocation. But he didn't take me up on any of that. So anyway, we've had several laughs over his letting his hair grow. Yeah.
All right, great. So Pastor Ron, when you first came to St. Mark's, what surprised you about the congregation? What were you not expecting? Is there anything that comes to mind when you think about that?
I remember, I think it was when I came to meet the congregation for the first time, Hans and I got off in the corner and started having a conversation. And I remember telling him that I feel so much at home here. And I don't know that this was a surprise, but certainly very early on, discovering how committed you are, members of the congregation, to your ministry in the community, your outreach to the community, and but even more so, all of your talent, your leadership talent. I'm looking at the screen here. All of the leadership that many of you have offered to this congregation. You're a strong congregation, and again, shouldn't be a surprise because that's who you are, but I certainly felt blessed to be part of this congregation, being able to turn to many of you to provide the leadership in the various times that we needed it.
Okay, and again, would invite others, if you have questions, to either put them in the chat or raise your Zoom hand. Yes, Elaine, please.
Hi, Pastor Ron, Pastor Elizabeth, everybody. My question is, Pastor Ron, what was the biggest adjustment you had to make to being at St. Mark's compared to in Oregon? Because it was a big change for you to go from there to here. So what was one of the biggest challenges there?
You know, like I just commented, I mean, I walked into this place and I felt at home. So that to me wasn't a big adjustment. The congregation I served in Seattle is a little different in terms of locale, a little bit different situation, adjacent to a university. But in terms of the people, the members, the commitment to ministry, that was not a big change. I think probably the biggest challenge for me was learning about the relationship between the congregation and Martin Luther Tower. That was a big challenge, understanding that relationship and looking at that point 3 different budgets, because there was some middle ground joint budget at the time, and trying to figure that all out. And I know there's been a lot of work this last 3 years in trying to consolidate some of that process and make it more efficient. But I would say that was probably one of the biggest challenges, is understanding the relationship between the tower and the congregation.
Well, it was a challenge for us too, right? Because we were in the midst of that governance work, getting clarity about our institutions and their responsibilities. So I think we're much farther along now than we were. So.
Great. Thank you. And thank you for the question, Elaine. Let's see. I got this anonymous question. Pastor Ron, could you list the members of the congregation that you like and those that, no, just kidding. Actually, there is a question. I know the answer is you appreciate all members of St. Mark's and St. Mark's congregation. So, let me just ask, what's next? What are you planning to do in your retirement? And I think there's a specific question from Greg is, are you going to be singing in a church choir at some point?
First thing I want to point out and emphasize, because I had this question posed to me just 2 days ago, what are you going to do when you get back to Seattle? Cynthia and I are staying put here in Richmond. We are not moving back to the Northwest. We came down here for her position at PLTS as a professor, and she has many more years ahead of her in that regard. So,
That's good, Cynthia.
so we are staying in the area, but I will be spending more time going up to the Pacific Northwest to see grandchildren in particular. But my mom is 94 and assisted living. I have not been able to be in the same room with her for over a year, even though I've been up there about 3 times. So I look forward to that. And we have a lot of friends up there. I have a roommate from junior college that lives in Portland I haven't seen for 40 years. I've reconnected with him and want to spend a little time in Portland visiting friends. So that's my main agenda in the months to come. Yeah. But to answer Greg's question, I haven't really thought much about joining the church choir. What I have thought about in terms of my own volunteer opportunities, I have been keeping my eye on an organization called Youth Spirit Works. They're the organization that's building the small houses for homeless youth in various properties in Oakland and Berkeley. And I would love to get my hammer out and nails and participate in something like that. And the other thing is I've long had a fantasy of being a pastor at a Midwest town church, being a short order breakfast cook in the morning and visiting parishioners in the afternoon. And when I was in Seattle, I volunteered for 11 years at one Saturday a month with members of our congregation making breakfast at a youth shelter. So I would like to find a place where I can be a short order breakfast cook for some shelter or organization that could use that help.
All right, short order cook. That's fantastic. And actually, that's a good segue into a question that Laura asked, just around youth and our ability to engage youth. It's obviously something that you focused on quite a bit during your time at St. Mark's, and I think this could obviously a question for you, Pastor Ron, but also for you, Pastor Elizabeth. Like, what are some ways that you feel we can continue to engage youth and bring them into our church, to the congregation?
I think once we can resume worship on site, any way that youth can be invited to provide worship leadership, the younger ones perhaps acolyting, but the older ones, once confirmed, they're eligible to serve communion, certainly to lector. Any way that they can be have some responsibility for leading worship is one way. Erin Scheller has agreed to be a youth sponsor. She's been with me for the last 3 years, so she knows the youth. And if there's anybody else that would like to be of support to her and assist her in that, that would be wonderful, because that ministry needs to be carried on. And again, you know, that won't necessarily be the primary focus of Pastor Elizabeth in the months to come, or an interim pastor in the future. So again, it'll be dependent upon the adults in the congregation to help that happen.
Great. Thank you. So let me ask this question. So imagine 5 years from now, you come back to worship at St. Mark's. What would warm your heart? Like, what would you like to see? What would the experience be like? Like if you could say, this is what would make me really happy to see this at St. Mark's, what would that be?
For worship, That's a good question. I'd like to see 3 services on Sunday mornings with maybe some variety of styles of worship. Not to keep our choral Eucharist strong and the 9 o'clock service strong, but maybe there's a service that specifically tries to outreach to youth or young adults. So I'd love to see 3 services, or 2 services Sunday morning and 1 Sunday evening, and really using worship as a way to invite people to know God's love, but might be hesitant coming to a more traditional service. I think there's a great opportunity for that here.
I shared this with the executive committee, because they've grilled me through an exit interview just like this. But St. Mark's is has been and continues to be a wonderful venue for concerts, choral groups. But I still have a hope and a vision for the possibility of using the wonderful space that you have here as a lecture hall. And that would require somebody perhaps on staff to contact people, invite people, and you need a budget for that to happen. Not just be a venue for other groups to come and use the sanctuary for that purpose, but actually have somebody on staff who helps to organize that and make that happen. That would make my heart sing, coming back 5 years from now and knowing that you as a congregation are organizing and hosting prominent people to come in and give lectures here, because that is one way to reach out to the community and invite them and say, this is something that we're offering because we've planned and organized it, and do that. And I'll just plant a little seed of connection. Many of you have heard about the ministry called Farming Hope down at Manny's Cafe. And I've been there about 3 or 4 times for lunch. And the 3rd time I was there, I noticed up on the wall their schedule for people coming in and giving lectures. I mean, almost every evening, because they have an adjoining room where people come in. And I asked Jamie Stark, I said, who organizes this? And he said, well, the owner of Manny's does this. He has all these connections. And I thought to myself, and I would have done this if COVID hadn't come along, I would have gone to him and said, look, if you needed a larger venue, would you like to use St. Mark's for that purpose with all your connections? And so that would be a place to start with, reaching out and networking with getting speakers to come in.
Wonderful. Thank you. So we are close to time. I guess I'll ask this question. Is there anything that you wanted us to ask, or is there anything else that you wanted to make certain came out during this conversation?
Before I answer that, let me go back to the previous question, because the other thing did go through my mind. What would warm my heart 5 years from now if I came back, if the younger children would come up to me and say, hi, Pastor Ron. That would warm my heart.
Who can argue with that?
Yeah, right, exactly. Ask your question again, Randy.
But it's actually almost throwing it back to both of you. Is there anything else that you wanted to, you wanted to say as part of this conversation? Anything else that you wanted, that you were hoping we would ask? And it's okay, we're almost at time. So if the answer is no, we have lots coming up later on this morning, but is there anything else that you would, you wanted us to ask during this conversation?
I mean, one of the questions could be, what's it like to be a pastor at St. Mark's? And when I've been asked that by either some of you or other colleagues, I've said it's been the absolute most challenging call I've had, but it's been the most joy-filled and meaningful call that I've had. And I've served 6 parishes, so it's a challenge just because of our setting. In all its glory here in the city, but it's been the most meaningful call that I've had. And that's because of all of you.
Great.
Yeah.
And for
Thank
me,
you.
yeah, it comes back to our relationship, Pastor Elizabeth and I. I'll very quickly answer this. My first call was with the lead pastor who did no planning with the staff. I mean, he ran the ship. My second call was with the pastor who we never had one staff meeting. Even I was an associate, we never had one staff meeting. And then I was on my own up in Seattle. I had a couple of associates in ministry, but in terms of, that collegial relationship, it wasn't always there. And then coming here and being able to conclude my ministry with Pastor Elizabeth as a colleague and a partner in ministry in the ways that we, as she mentioned, both plan and debrief things as it happens. It's been a wonderful experience in the conclusion of my call ministry.
Well, I think that's a great way to end the adult forum, but we had well over 50 people here. So it was a great attendance. Thank you all so much for attending. And I think this conversation really showed why we've so appreciated you, both of you, as a ministry team, and how it's just been an incredible, it's been just wonderful for us to have both of you as our leaders in ministry. And of course, for everyone, this is just the beginning of this morning. So please go to YouTube for the service, and then please join for the fellowship hour after the service, where we will continue to celebrate the ministry of Pastor Ron. So with that, thank you, everyone, and we'll see you at church.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.